My name is Jake Miller. I'm 28 years old and live in a small town in Oregon. I work as a mechanic, so I'm no stranger to late nights. Tonight was no different. After a long double shift at the shop, I was exhausted and ready to get home. The highway I usually take is a long, lonely stretch of road, and at this hour, it's typically dead quiet. I've driven it hundreds of times, so I wasn't expecting anything out of the ordinary. But that night would be different. A night I'd never forget. About 20 minutes into my drive, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. A large truck was behind me, and its bright beams were nearly blinding. I didn't think much of it at first, figuring it was just another driver trying to get home. But something was off. The truck wasn't trying to pass me. Instead, it stayed right behind me, tailgating me way too close for comfort. I sped up slightly, hoping the truck would back off or pass, but it didn't. It kept pace with me, its headlights practically burning into the back of my skull. I started to get nervous. I pressed the gas pedal harder, speeding up to put some distance between us. But no matter how fast I went, the truck stayed right there, practically glued to my bumper. My heart was racing now, and I could feel my palms getting sweaty as I gripped the steering wheel tighter. What the hell is this guy doing? I muttered to myself. I figured the best thing to do was pull over. Maybe the driver was just in a hurry, and once I was out of the way, they'd pass. I slowed down and steered onto the shoulder of the road. The truck followed, stopping a few feet behind me. I stared into my rearview mirror, but the truck's high beams were so bright I couldn't make out the driver. I waited for a minute, then another. The truck didn't move. It just sat there, idling, its headlights cutting through the darkness. My heart pounded in my chest. Something felt wrong, very wrong. I sat there, trying to calm myself down, but the longer I waited, the worse the feeling in my gut became. Suddenly, the truck's lights turned off. Complete darkness swallowed the highway. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced into my side mirror and saw the driver's door open. A figure stepped out, but I couldn't make out any details in the dark. The silhouette just stood there for a moment, motionless. Panic hit me like a wave. I didn't wait to find out what was going on. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, my tires screeching as I sped off down the highway. My mind raced as fast as the car, heart pounding in my ears. I didn't look back. I didn't want to know who or what had gotten out of that truck. I just knew I had to get away. For a few minutes, I thought I was safe. The road stretched out in front of me, empty and silent. But when I glanced in my rearview mirror again, my blood ran cold. There it was, the truck. Its headlights were back, glaring at me from behind like before. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles white. I floored the gas pedal, pushing my car as fast as it could go. But the truck kept up with me, never losing ground. I couldn't understand it. How had it caught up to me so quickly? It didn't make sense. My mind raced. Maybe this was some kind of prank, or maybe the driver was messing with me. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The truck seemed to vanish and reappear, like it was playing some twisted game. Up ahead, I saw the flickering neon lights of a gas station. Without thinking, I swerved into the lot, parking under the bright lights near the entrance. I sat there, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting to see if the truck would follow. Didn't. I waited for what felt like hours, but the truck never pulled in. It was gone, as if it had vanished into thin air. I sat there for a while, trying to catch my breath, my hands still shaking on the wheel. The gas station was empty, and the only sound was the distant hum of the neon sign buzzing above me. Eventually, I decided I couldn't stay there forever. I started my car again and drove home, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see those bright headlights again. But the truck never reappeared. I made it home safely, but I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. The next morning, I turned on the news, still rattled from the night before. That's when I heard the report. A truck matching the description of the one that had followed me was found parked just outside of town. The driver had been dead for hours. I froze, my coffee cup trembling in my hand. How was that possible? The driver was dead, but I had seen someone get out of the truck. Someone or something had been following me. To this day, I don't know what happened that night, but every time I drive that stretch of highway, I can't help but check my rearview mirror, just in case those headlights appear again. I'll never forget that feeling. The terror of knowing something was out there, chasing me, and I couldn't escape it. My name is Ella Thompson. I'm 22, and I live in a small town just outside of Boise, Idaho. I work nights at a diner, and by the time my shift ends, the roads are usually deserted. It was around 2:30 a.m., and I was exhausted, eager to get home and crash into bed. The night was unusually foggy, the kind of fog where you can't see more than a few feet in front of you. The roads were empty, and the only sound was the low hum of my car's engine as I made my way down the familiar back road that led to my house. I had driven that road countless times, but something felt off that night. The fog wrapped around the car, making everything feel distant, almost unreal. As I rounded a sharp bend, my headlights cut through the mist, illuminating something up ahead. A car, parked in the middle of the road with its hazard lights blinking. At first, I thought maybe someone had broken down, but the longer I stared at the car, the stranger it seemed. The hazard lights blinked in a steady rhythm, the only light in the eerie, fog-covered darkness. I slowed down, unsure of what to do. There was no one else around, no houses for miles. Just me, the fog, and that abandoned car. My instincts told me to keep driving, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over to the side of the road, leaving my engine running as I stepped out. The cold night air bit at my skin, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. As I approached the car, my heart pounded in my chest. I noticed the driver's side door was slightly ajar. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But my voice was swallowed by the thick fog. No response. I moved closer, peering into the window, and that's when I saw it. The driver's seat was covered in blood. Fresh, dark blood, smeared across the seat and pooling on the floor. My stomach dropped, and I took a step back, my mind racing with questions. What had happened here? Where was the driver? Panic surged through me. I needed to get out of there, fast. I turned on my heel and ran back to my car, my heart hammering in my chest. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my keys, unlocking the door and throwing myself into the driver's seat. As soon as I was back in the car, I slammed the door shut, locked it, and sped off, not daring to look back at the abandoned vehicle. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. Who leaves a car like that? And why was there so much blood? I tried to steady my breathing, focusing on the road ahead, but then my phone rang. I glanced down at the screen, hoping it was a friend, anyone, who could calm me down, but the number was blocked. Hesitant, I answered, my voice shaky. "Hello." A distorted voice crackled on the other end, low and menacing. "You shouldn't have stopped," it said. My blood turned to ice. I froze, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. "Who is this?" I managed to whisper. The voice let out a chilling laugh. Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hand, disbelief and terror washing over me. How did they know I stopped? Were they watching me? My heart pounded as I pressed down harder on the gas, desperate to get home. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I didn't turn off the engine right away. I sat there, gripping the wheel, trying to calm down, but my mind was spinning. That voice, how did they know? The next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over me. I turned on the news, and that's when I saw it, a report about the car I had seen. The police had found it abandoned on the back road, just as I had. But there was more. The car belonged to a man who had been reported missing 3 days ago. His family said he'd last been seen driving that same car. But the most chilling part? His body was never found. I felt sick as I turned off the TV. Whoever had been in that car wasn't coming back. And whoever called me that night, they were still out there, waiting, watching. I don't drive that road anymore. My name is Sophia Richards. I'm 24, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I was driving home after visiting a friend in a nearby town, but I stayed longer than I should have, and now it was dark. My GPS signal cut out halfway through the drive, and I found myself lost on a narrow back road. I hadn't seen another car in miles. After driving in circles for what felt like hours, I spotted a small, run-down diner on the side of the road. The flickering neon sign looked like something out of a horror movie, but I had no choice. I needed directions, so I pulled in and parked. The place looked deserted. As I stepped inside, the smell of stale grease hit me. The lights were dim, and the counter was covered in dust. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice echoed in the emptiness. Just when I was about to leave, a voice came from behind me. "You lost." I jumped and spun around. A man stood in the shadows near the back of the diner. He looked unkempt, his clothes dirty and his eyes unsettling. He stepped closer, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Yeah, I'm lost. My GPS isn't working," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you tell me how to get back to the main road?" The man smiled, though it wasn't reassuring. "I can help you. I know these roads real well. I'll ride with you and give directions." Everything inside me screamed not to let him in the car, but I was desperate and had no other options that I forced myself to nod, and he followed me out to my car. As we drove, he gave me directions, but they seemed to lead deeper into the middle of nowhere. The roads became narrower, and the trees on either side grew denser. My uneasiness grew with every mile. Something wasn't right. The man's tone shifted. He began asking personal questions. "You live alone?" he asked, his voice quiet but cold. I tensed up, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Why do you want to know?" He didn't answer, just chuckled softly, a sound that sent chills through me. The longer he was in the car, the more trapped I felt. The road ahead seemed endless, and my phone still had no signal. Suddenly, the man leaned closer to me, his breath hot on my neck. "I was waiting for someone like you," he whispered, his voice dark and menacing. My stomach dropped. He wasn't helping me. He had something else planned. I felt panic rise in my throat, but I knew I had to stay calm. My mind raced for a way out. Without thinking, I slammed on the brakes. The car screeching to a sudden stop, the man lurched forward in his seat, surprised. Before he could say anything, I yelled, "Get out of my car!" For a moment, he just stared at me, his face expressionless. Then, slowly, a twisted smile crept across his face. "You sure about that?" he said in a low, threatening tone. My heart pounded in my chest, but I wasn't going to let fear stop me. "Get out," I repeated, trying to keep my voice from shaking. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, then shrugged and opened the door. As he stepped out, he leaned back in, his face inches from mine. "You'll regret this," he hissed, before slamming the door shut. I didn't waste a second. As soon as he was out, I floored the gas and sped away, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I didn't dare look back, but my heart didn't stop racing the entire drive home. The next morning, I turned on the local news. My stomach dropped as the headline flashed across the screen. "Hitchhiker found dead on rural road." They showed his picture. It was the man who had been in my car. The police said he had been dead for hours before they found him. But that wasn't possible. He had been with me, alive and breathing. To this day, I can't explain what happened. All I know is that I'll never pick up a stranger again, and I'll always listen to my instincts.